All right. So first, very briefly, I thought we'd talk a little bit about why. I'm not going to go over this in depth at all, but I think that we've seen this many times where essentially the reason that we need to follow web accessibility standards and put it in our workflow is so that we can be inclusive, we can improve usability in general for everyone, and obviously, I mean, we need to follow the Section 508 rule. So following the law is important. So we'll just say that. I think we've all talked about this quite a bit, but this should be a good base for our thoughts as we move forward. Today, we'll go through four main things, and we would like to have a discussion during these topics. The technologist view is essentially a concept that really I've been thinking about a lot lately and that we have discussed on the team. And so I'd like to share that with you. Requirements, what are the requirements? How do you find them? How do we implement those requirements into our development workflow? And how do you all implement the requirements into your development workflows? And testing, we'll provide some resources for testing. Again, those we can certainly share in the future, or basically I have them on a slide so that you can use them in the future. We are happy to share the slides, but this would be a way that you can take the testing a little bit further. So let's start talking about the concept for technologists. Really, from a technology standpoint, it's a little bit different. I think that there's people involved with accessibility, from us as web developers to content editors to end users specifically. And so how we all look at web accessibility is going to be a little bit different, because we're going to encounter essentially different goals that are required of us. So from a technology standpoint, we need to learn what the accessibility standards are. So we need to understand what it is that we need to provide as a technologist. Then we're going to need to understand how to code that standard. And by that, I mean, how do we provide the ability for a content editor to essentially enter content such as alt text, for example. You know, us as developers need to provide that ability to content editors. Content editors are not able to make alt tags themselves if they don't have a field for it, right? Then we need to test. So we're going to want to test our end users. We're going to want to test it code-wise. Sometimes there's automated testing we can do, and manual, both. So we need to be able to make sure that what we've developed works. Then we need to, in some cases, not all, because I know that this will depend on workflow, we, even as developers, need to train content editors how to use what we've developed. So when you train them, I didn't add it here, but I had yesterday a little bubble in between train and learn again, which was test again. So you're testing with that end user. And then you're going to start over again, right? Because there might be new standards. There might be another standard that you're going to work on. And so you're constantly moving in this circle. And each accessibility standard is probably going to be in a different place on your website, on your platform, on whatever it is that you're doing to develop it. So to begin, you know, in this picture, you can see that we do need to learn accessibility standards. And we need to learn them for a lot of reasons. You can see that people are learning in 2 or 3 different ways here, or even more than that. We have a phone, we have a computer, there's a book, there's probably a smartwatch on that guy. So this is how people learn, not just our prospective students, but I think parents, I feel like, learn this way, right? I'm getting ready to send a kid to college next year. So I'm learning. And then there's also researchers and collaborators throughout the nation that are trying to learn from our websites. There's people, faculty members that say, I know Iowa State's doing this great thing, and I want to be able to reference that in the talk I'm about to give in 5 minutes, and I have a smartphone. And I'm going to search Iowa State University right now because I know I just talked to this person the other day and I forgot their name, but I want to give them mention. That's a usability and accessibility issue that we need to be able to provide to people in general. So in order to know what the guidelines are so that we can provide that to others, there's some resources that we have here. And again, I'm not going to spend today going through each one of these. I think that we can all do that, and some of us have. But the WCAG Quick Guide is fantastic. That is a way that you can actually filter the standards based on the requirements. So if you want to see just the AA standard requirements, you can filter those pretty easily. Section 508, if you'd like to learn more about the law and what that means, that's what's recently been redone, I guess, not redone, but updated. And so you can learn more about that. And then this is kind of our favorite, tends to be one of our favorites in the office. It's the WCAG checklist. Zaire has shared this with me, like, I don't know, Zaire, it's probably in your first week or so. And it's been an excellent resource for us. That is written by a gentleman who has a law degree and a creative writing degree. It's fantastic. It makes these standards very understandable. So what we'll do now is start more of a discussion. Sarah's going to lead us in demonstrating a little bit about how we've used accessibility in regards to collapsible blocks. And then at that point, when you get done sharing, we can open it up for others to share how you may have improved accessibility in your website.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Sarah Carney again, and I do front-end web development and biology IT. And I wanted to share with you like a little usability, accessibility thing we made, and sort of some of the pitfalls, trial and error, and then how we eventually accomplished it. Let's see. So this is my little CodePen demo. And this should make it a little easier to see. So basically on our platform, we like to have areas of content or navigation that are collapsible. And so right now we didn't have a way to set some of them as closed by default and set some of them, and then usually on mobile, they're all closed by default. But what if we wanted them to be open by default in mobile? And so we had a lot of different things to figure out. And at the very top, I'll read it off, but we had some requirements. If JavaScript is disabled, all the blocks are always open. And I didn't think of that at first. So I like developed this whole big thing and it was all working and I loved it. And then I showed it to a tester, our backend developer, John Rurik, and he's like, yeah, but what if they don't have JavaScript? I'm like, crap. And I like stormed back off into the other room and like totally refactored the code because that's a usability thing I'd forgotten about. So it was important that our team always pitches in, and I always forget about it. So if the JavaScript is disabled, all the content needs to be visible all the time. Great. But if JavaScript is enabled, I want to make sure default blocks are closed by default. If JavaScript is enabled, blocks can be opened by clicking on the title. And right now I don't have good visual affordances, but we have them. Let's see. If JavaScript is enabled, the blocks can start closed on mobile and be opened with a tap. And then we needed to make sure if content is hidden, it needs to still be available to screen readers. And in CSS, there are ways that you can visually hide content, display none, text transparent, or whatever. But I needed to find out what's the accessible way to hide content so that screen readers can find them. The answer is absolute positioning. You just fling it off the side of the page. It feels hacky, but it's recommended. And so we eventually got this working. So once I hit a mobile breakpoint, a mobile size breakpoint, it should refresh here. Great. So I can say this block is always closed by default. Great, on mobile it works. Our regular block should be closed on mobile by default, and then we have our default open block that's always open. So that is sort of one of the processes we went through, and the key was John Rurick telling me, what about JavaScript disabled? So now we're transitioning to what, Anne?
So now, are there any other accessibility issues that you've run into as a developer that you have actually solved, or issues that you need to solve that you can share with us? What are some of the things that you're facing? Not that we're going to solve them today, but we can share maybe where we're. Anybody? Okay, sure.
So in our courses, we have just lots and lots of graphics.
Just a second. Let's try and get you so that you're on the microphone. Would you please come up here and have, you can just have a seat up here even if you'd like. So if you could introduce yourself just again really quick and then explain your.
I went to I'm Derek Friedberg from the Batman. And so in our online courses, we have many graphic illustrations. So the problem is that many times they have graphs on them and they have text on them, which makes them very hard to make them accessible. So we have some solutions for that, but we don't have a full solution yet for that. We've been exploring using, instead of regular images, JPEG images, we've explored using SVG images. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, which can help, but that causes other problems. So we're still working on it.
Good. Yes.
Can I ask a simple question? Sure. All of our materials are online too, and so we've kind of gone through the same thing. And one of the things I think would help is if there was some sort of like reference guide somewhere for like when instructors develop these courses, like these are the types of things you would put in an image. So for instance, if there's a really important equation that they need to know that applies to a specific graph, maybe that equation should not be embedded in the graph, but it should be separate and below it. Stuff like that. Are there any resources like that anywhere?
So Zaira, I believe you might be able to help address this. The question is in regards to, we're talking about charts and graphs and making them accessible, especially Gretchen was asking particularly about if you have a course, maybe in Blackboard even, like anyway, just on a website or in a course, you have maybe an intense math formula or something that's embedded in an image, if there's resources to help with that. And so I know that you would, I think, be able to help point someone in a direction for assistance with that, maybe?
It depends. If you're trying to use some sort of a graphic that is too complex to be somewhat, coded to be accessible, the recommendation would be to either defer to something that is an alternate way of representing what you need to represent. I mean, once you get into representing things in a way that is so complicated that maybe even a user with vision and complete hearing can really make something out of it, you might have to think it twice. On the other hand, if it's math equations, Pinar Arpachi has developed an excellent protocol with tool. It includes, let me look it up just a second and I'll get back to you. But I'm not sure if you're talking about graphs or equations. I couldn't hear very well.
Yeah.
Guideline that would help people know this is an okay development, or maybe I need to do this.
Okay, so more, Gretchen's saying more along the lines of an established guideline for development so that people are aware of how to relay the information accessibly.
What type of information though? Math equations or math visual representations of graphics and things like that?
I feel like we're talking about all of the above.
Okay.
You know, illustrations, and I believe it was probably in the last workshop we had this conversation a little bit too, I think, where
Yeah, definitely.
it's a common theme
Yes.
in communicating digitally. So
yeah, let me there's this tool. Let me look it up because I
Okay.
can't recall the name right away.
No problem. While she's doing that, does anybody have any other ramp? Can you come to the microphone, please? I'm sorry, we're gonna all get some calisthenics in today because
So this summer I was working with the ELO teams.
it's got a video on it, so
Alright,
the front of it is what she can see. So
I can keep those here. That's
it's fine.
alright.
Just
Yeah, so the ELO teams have developed some tools. I can work with them and probably publish in our website with like specific equations and graph things. So it will be probably a couple of weeks from now. But if you want to type some, don't type any equation within a graph because it's not accessible. So you can put in the description, and when you do those things, you can do either on MATLAB or there is a tool called LaTeX. And if you
That's what it is, latex. But
you,
I just sent you a link to a software application called Math Player, which is basically an assistive technology that it's based off of MathML, which is the coding for math. So to put it succinctly, the golden rule or the standard should be MathML, which is kind of like the HTTP for math. But since not everybody has that training, there's other tools that help you turn things into MathML. And this is one of them, the player that I just sent you a link for.
do you see it should be on the screen, I think.
There's this other one.
Let's see.
The second one helps you identify a tool.
Oh. Cool. That's great. So it sounds like there's some options out there for math equations that exist when it comes
Search for Pinar's protocol, which I have somewhere. I'll come up with it in a minute if you give me a few minutes.
No problem. Anytime you get it, just pop it in the chat. Does anybody else have accessibility questions or things that they've noticed that need to be addressed in their areas? in your area? So with that, I think we can continue on. I'm going to go ahead and,
Oh, hold on a second. I found it.
oh, good.
Oh, sorry.
No?
Yeah, I did. Okay, so you go ahead. I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay, no problem. And I will try and watch for that because when I go into the keynote, I'm not sure how much I can see from Zoom. So I'll just go ahead and play this here. Oh, good. We can see it. So I'll just move this down to the bottom. Okay. Ah, sorry, guys. I actually clicked the link. Let's go to the next button. Okay.
Okay.
I think that this is fun. What I'm trying to do is escape out of here and move this down a little bit.
Oh, while you do that, I found I found it, and now I remember. She says that she's worked with a few professors who have to put their equations on Blackboard. As a result, she's developed a protocol where she goes into LaTeX, gets the original equation information, and then she transports it to the math type export window, math type being an application, a software application that turns it into the MathML language. And then she copies that code and puts it into Blackboard. In this case, you could use that code to put it in a website or wherever is it that you have hypertext and HTML type stuff. So it's LaTeX to math type to Blackboard in her case. In your case, it would be LaTeX to math type to whatever web content.
Great. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So I'm having trouble resizing my chat box, so I'm going to minimize that, Zaira,
Okay.
for now. I'll stick it here. I think it should be good. All right. There are some testing resources that are available that, again, they're in the slide deck so that you can access them later. I'm happy to share the slides with you. These are Tenon, which is something that our team has used fairly extensively in accessibility testing. It's a way, or it's a testing option that actually shows you the code and the line within the code that the issue has been found. PODIS is another one that Zaire has brought to our attention, and that one has actually been kind of nice to use too. They all work a little differently. I think all of the testing tools do, but that's another one that does address code specifically. The FAE testing tool is something in conjunction with the AI Inspector, which the University of Illinois has created. And so they've got a great team there and have been collaborative in sharing, giving access to that tool that they've developed themselves. So that's something you may want to check out if you're interested. And then SiteImprove. SiteImprove is just recently come out with a add-on for your browser that actually tells you what should be manually tested versus what can be automatically tested, and then allows you to kind of check something that says, yes, I manually tested this and it's fixed, sort of thing, which is the best solution that I've found for finding a way to provide a client or an end user with some sort of documentation that upon launch, for example, their site is AA compliant. That's one of the, you know, options that I've found. We'd like to get to that point. So. Next, we're going to jump into talking a little bit about workflow. This is my quick sketch of our workflow. This actually does exist. This is what we've created in Jira. We use a ticketing system from Atlassian called Jira. And essentially, we open a ticket. When someone's actively working on it, it's in progress. Then it goes into a needs review bucket. We have a developer that comes and reviews it. If it passes, it goes to ready to be committed. If it needs work, it goes to reopen. And then once it's been committed, it gets resolved and closed. So that's all fine and great, right? I mean, we have this little process and it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good on paper. But we all know that really, there's a lot of people here. Like, this is not just a fancy little diagram and something can automatically move through some sort of system and happen, right? So when it comes to accessibility, there's a lot of people that need to be involved. There's a lot of communication that needs to happen with everyone with, you know, in this workflow. And now it's up to us as technologists to add in accessibility. And so how do we do that? You know, how do we add accessibility and how do we get everyone from the Code Ninja to the client involved, right? We've got project managers, we've got, you know, maybe 2 or 3 levels of sign off of people. We have content editors. It's just a lot of people. So I told Angela I was going to do this and I forgot. I was going to take a screenshot of all of our little tickets, but that's okay. We'll explain a little bit about how we've started to implement this in our workflow. One of the first things that we did was go into Jira and create a ticket specifically for every single standard that's required for AA compliance. So there's a ticket in our web development team. We're working on essentially a platform type of development. And so we want to make sure that whatever we add is compliant. And so there is a ticket that we can relate so that we can relate all of our tickets to the specific standard that should be applied or needs to be thought about in that specific code. So Angela is going to walk through a quick demonstration of a ticket and what that might look like. So I'll let you take it away.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead and click on it?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay.
So it should open. There you go.
So it's important to like go through and analyze the sites that you've made to make sure that they're accessible like as they are. But it's also important to think about it as you're adding new features. And that's what I'm going to model here. So while we were making our new theme, we wanted to have like our black bar menu at the top that has like single sign-on links and stuff. We wanted to ensure that that was accessible, like so that keyboard users could navigate it properly while also having the drop downs. So this is kind of the process that we used. Anne went through and listed like some qualifications that our drop downs needed, like the links that we wanted to have on it, and like contrast was another important thing. So what I did like when we first started was like going through possible solutions that I saw. So there are some jQuery libraries that are available online, which
I think is a better solution, because having something that other people have used embedded is always better than like whipping up your own thing, which may or may not be good. And then Anne gave some feedback. So eventually what we settled on was something called Smart Menus, which was put into a content management system called Backdrop. So that was something that had been vetted by a community. So like a lot of people had taken a look at this library and said that it was a good idea. So that was what we decided on. And luckily, one of the developers in Backdrop is still pretty big in the Drupal community, so she was kind enough to make a Drupal module for Smart Menus. So yeah, like at every step of the development process, there were multiple people looking at it. Like it wasn't just me and Anne, it was our coworker Nick. And then after Sarah came in, like she also looked at it and mentioned that the links were too small. They were like 16 pixels wide or something, when they should be at least 20 pixels so that people can click on them more easily. Was one of the concerns. So I think like this issue is a really good example of how to think about accessibility while you're developing. Just having other people look at what you've made and have like lots of input so that you can ensure that it's better and more usable.
Can you scroll up and show where
Yeah.
you can see the related tickets? So in this
Yeah,
ticketing
that too.
system, you're able to see the related tickets to it. So you might have 2 or 3 things going at once that are related. And so when I mentioned that we had a ticket for every single accessibility standard, that's what I was referring to. It's kind of a nice way to relate it. So we can see that it's related to 2.1.2, the keyboard trap. There may be other accessibility standards that it's related to. But each of those tickets, essentially, those accessibility tickets, if you click on one, I don't know what this one is, at minimum, it's going to have 2 links. It's going to have the McGrath description, which is that WCAG description, and then the WCAG link to the specific guideline. You know, what does that guideline say? And we recently had a couple students help us go through, and in order for them to learn about accessibility as well, look at these and determine at a very high level what might be some steps to test that. So that we actually have some steps here, and then we can all go back and continuously improve those steps for testing. So it's a great thing to do. And personally, it was a fun thing to see a student do, because they are someone who isn't necessarily familiar with the code. They're an end user. They're, you know, learning. So they can bring a lot of positive things to this conversation, like awareness to us as a team. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions in regards to workflow? Can anyone share their workflow, like what you're doing on your teams for code workflow, code management, like as far as accessibility goes? Probably gonna give someone a headache if they look at it. I'll have to edit this video. Anyone? Do you have like workflows, even like for yourself, that you go through? Like, this is just my natural workflow for development.
So I have to have a whole bunch of screens so I can have all of the browsers open. And then I just go through and test it in each browser and test it at different sizes in each browser. And then back up through all the versions of IE. Yes, yes.
If I may,
does anyone have any questions about that? Like about just workflow in general, or do you have tools that you use that you'd recommend? So those were from that slide that I presented a couple ago, like, yeah. So basically, Wave is another one. I think Wave comes from WebAIM specifically. That's really easy. You can test a page. One thing to look at, when I first started learning about accessibility, to watch for is that some of these testers are going to actually test your website. Some of them are going to just test that web page specifically. So it's going to be important to be able to distinguish that when you're using a testing tool. You know, what is this tool doing? Is it testing my entire site, or is it testing this page? So basically, those are automated tests. But it brings us to a good, you know, transition here, because not all of the testing can be done automatically. So there's manual testing that's needed for some of the requirements. It just cannot physically be done without a human being. There's not really, from what I've found, if you know, tell me, a solution without paying reasonable amount of money to give you this seal of approval. This website is AA compliant. You know, that, to my knowledge, doesn't really exist. It's because websites are always changing. This is not a print document. So that's one thing. The other is, it's just a complicated thing to do, especially when items have to be manually tested. You can't do this without a human. And then, you know, understanding that automated testing isn't always going to be 100% accurate. So sometimes it's going to be, you know, a false positive even, like, and sometimes it may give you an error and it's not actually an error, right? So it just is very important to understand those things. Just because you have a red X, you're still going to have a human make sure that it's a legit red X, right? So, and the bottom line of all of this that I think we can walk away with from today is that being accessible is inclusive. And in order to continue to make our sites at Iowa State University accessible, we need to collaborate, raise awareness, and actually create and have an established process in our areas and in our units. Because if we don't have those things, then it's just that more difficult for us to face the fact that come January 2018, everything must be AA compliant. So really a benefit and a huge plus to Iowa State is having Zaira here. So the fact that we actually have a person that can help us collaborate, raise awareness, and create processes is amazing. So those are all good things. And that's all I had for today. So we hope that you had fun. And if you have some things to share or you'd like to continue talking about, we certainly can continue that discussion. Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Yes. Where are we as a university as a whole?
So the question is, where are we as a university essentially at in regards to this goal of accessibility, of this AA compliance? Did you hear that, Zaira? Yeah, or how we're measuring that. Zaira? I might have lost her. Wonky. Oh, she's not actually on here. Yeah, we might have lost her. Anyway, I can do my best. basically, I think we're definitely at the collaborative and awareness sort of stages from what I can see personally. Within the for the last year that Zahira's been here, I don't know, I can only speak from our team, like what we've seen, but there's been a huge awareness and collaboration that we've been able to experience. There's been more discussion with other teams on campus about it. Not, we're definitely being inclusive. I think that there's more opportunities like this meeting today to be collaborative with each other. And then, like I said, I think we're at the stage of getting that process straightened out. And I think that I'd like to hear what Zahira has to say in that regard. But to me, that's what I've seen through the reading that I've done, is that there's got to be a process. I had a webinar with NETSI, so the National Extension Technology Group, last week, I believe it was. And there were a couple other universities there, but Auburn was actually very good in that webinar, that discussion about accessibility, and really talking about that, the importance of having a process, a way to test, a way to communicate, and a way as a developer, from a developer standpoint, to include that in the development process. Because when it comes down to, like Berkeley, I have a letter, if somebody gets a letter from the Department of Justice, I think having a process is going to go a long way. Did you have anything, Ram, on that?
I'm out this for like almost a year. So like learning, we're still collecting information, like
right.
What accessibility exactly means.
So collecting information on what it means.
So we kind of like going through that phase now, and I can also say that we also pass the awareness among the community here. So we're
awareness.
In the phase of implementing, and this is not something that like the Office of Accessibility can go there and
right.
do their stuff. It's just like awareness that we can create in the developer, managers, and all those other people. So I think we did a whole bunch of those. People's aware, and people start asking things to us like, oh yeah, I want to make my stuff accessible. You start by or you have or what, how can I do? So I think we're in the beginning phase of implementing the accessibility.
Okay, so beginning phase of implementation.
Yeah.
Right. Good.
Those are more early adopters trying to stay ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we have
how do we drag the streaming process?
So will they shut down websites that are compliant in January?
No.
There is nothing such thing that says a shutdown website. It's just on improving process to
right.
keep going. So there's no such thing I have. But it's something that if you want to improve, but we have standard. We have a website, and we have many protocols that we develop.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to implement all of those, and you guys to have us and have you, and we will welcome to stop by us and email. And it's online. It's an ongoing process. It's not something you start down your website. Nothing.
Right.
It's better you like for the new stuff you develop on your content. It's good if you at least add up some basics that you can use up, and if you cannot do yourself, you can always
Mm-hmm.
there is no such thing that
no, I think that yeah. I mean, you can. Right. I mean, when you read, I haven't gone in depth with the current huge cases that are out. I've heard multiple times, for some reason, over the last few weeks, about Berkeley. But I think that it's going to be a case-by-case basis if something happens. It's not like it's going to be, oh, if you're not this is a problem. I think it's going to be specific. Like in the case of Berkeley, they specifically received contact. You can read the letter from the Department of Justice. It's online about their accessibility. The accessibility that wasn't, I guess, being how do I say this?
So what you're saying is Berkeley
Done.
received a letter indicating that
Yes, and they've taken down lots and lots of videos because they're not captioned, is the thing with them.
And that happens to others too.
Yeah, it's a lot of others. It's not just them. So, yeah. I've heard of other institutions receiving these letters. So it's a matter of complying. It's an important thing. But I feel that if something like that does happen, having a process that you can show is important. And I also have learned lately that if you read the words undue burden in the Section 508 information, some people kind of look at that like, oh, we have 500 videos, that's an undue burden to put closed captioning on, we're fine, right? And what this case recently is proving is that undue burden is a greater level of undue burden than you might expect, is what I'm learning. So, we can all just do the best we can, and collaborate and raise awareness to everyone along the way and continue to do that.
Are you saying that the actual documentation of the process is important for them?
I feel that it is. Yeah, I feel that it is. I don't know. I mean, I don't have anybody telling me this is important. I'm just, as a developer, in what I've learned about accessibility and what I've learned about the requirements, is that I feel personally that I can sleep better at night knowing that at least the immediate team that we're on is keeping this at a level of documentation that can be shown. Yeah. But like Ram said, I think it's at that implementation stage. So we're learning how the best ways are to implement it, and we're just trying. And Jira is an option for us to try. So that's what we're doing.
So have you guys posted anywhere in the mortgage documentation? You've already gone through all this?
Yeah, we've started to do that actually. So in our luggage documentation, specifically in regards to the theme, we have started listing out like very basics about accessibility. So this is a very early start. It's a step towards moving forward, and it's explaining how we are looking at some of these particulars. We also have a few pages as we go through the theme which talk about colors, and we don't just talk about colors, but we're trying to explain where is the color contrast acceptable and where is it not. So if you're developing a site at Iowa State, having yellow text on a red background is not AA compliant. So we're trying to raise awareness that that's not a compliant thing. So that's hopeful that we continue to share those sort of things to others and again, collaborate with others on that. So it's just a start. We're trying to go through different things, but there's some typography, and we've been going through our theme and looking at what's accessible and what's not and what's there right now. And I know that I don't think that there is a single site that we've created and the 150 that we have that use section 5 and 6, so it's not even there, but it's there in the background. Like, it's possible. We don't give that as an option to our end users. They can go to like level 3, I think, or something, but we're starting to dig deeper in trying to make sure that everything is addressed. All right, I know we're a couple minutes past. If you want to stick around and chat, that's totally great. Thank you for coming today, and I hope to see you at future workshops.